Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Now, not that long ago, I looked at which was the best value buy, the new GeForce GTX 1070 Ti or the existing 1080. I did this by comparing two MSI gaming models at their stock operating clock frequencies, as well as a custom overclock, which basically pushed both models as fast as they would go. In short, I found that if you don't plan to overclock, both models do offer a similar level of value. But for those of you that do plan to overclock, you will get the most bang for your buck with the new 1070 Ti. This, of course, is assuming that both models are available at the MSRP, $450 US for the 1070 Ti and $500 US for the 1080. Right now, the GTX 1070 Ti can be had for $450 US at both Newegg and Amazon, while the 1080 is selling for $520 at both locations. Pricing is yet to settle down for the 1070 Ti in Australia, and at $680, it's not much cheaper than the 1080s, which sell for around $720. So in the US, the 1070 Ti looks to be by far the best value option right now, while fellow Aussies will probably still opt for the GTX 1080. Anyway, today's video is about the GeForce GTX 1070 versus the 1070 Ti. I didn't overclock the vanilla 1070 in the previous video, and this had many of you questioning if overclocking that model would in fact be the best value option. So today we're going to find out. Before we do though, I should just note that buying a GeForce 10 series graphics card right now might not be the best move, as we're likely just months away from the release of what will probably end up being called the GeForce 20 series. I'll discuss this a bit more at the end of the video, but for now, let's talk about the system specs and then we'll get into the results. For testing, I've once again used my Core i7-8700K test system clocked at 5GHz with 32GB of DDR4 3000 memory. The MSI GeForce GTX 1070 Gaming X was used for the testing, and I've used other MSI gaming models for comparison. The 1070 Gaming X operated at 1949 MHz out of the box with a memory speed of 8.1 gigabits per second. Overclocked, I managed to raise the Turbo Boost 3.0 frequency to 2076 MHz, which is slightly higher than the 2050 MHz I was able to run the 1070 Ti at. The GDDR5 memory frequency has also been increased to 2350 MHz for a transfer rate of 9.4 gigabits per second. This means the overclocked 1070, 1070 Ti, and the 1080 all roughly overclocked to the same frequency. That said, whereas our overclock did boost the 1080's operating frequency by 10% and the 1070 Ti by 12%, the 1070 was only boosted by 7%. So it will see the smallest improvement of the three GPUs tested, as it was already quite aggressively overclocked from factory. First up, we have Assassin's Creed Origins, and here overclocking the GTX 1070 netted us just a few extra frames for a very mild 5% performance boost. That said though, we did see a decent 9% increase for the 1% low result. Perhaps the increased memory bandwidth helped here. Anyway, once overclocked to the max, the 1070 was still slower than the stock 1070 Ti by a decent margin. In fact, the 1070 Ti was 9% faster at its stock clock speeds and 21% faster once overclocked. So for overclockers, the 1070 Ti is looking like the far more attractive product here. Here we see similar margins when testing with Destiny 2. The 1070 became 6% faster once overclocked, but even so, with the overclock, it still trailed the stock 1070 Ti by a 4% margin. Then once we overclocked the 1070 Ti, that did become 14% faster than the maxed out 1070. Again, the overclocked 1070 provided just 6% more frames, this time in F1 2017. This meant it was 6% slower than the 1070 Ti and 17% slower once the Ti model was overclocked. Another 6% gain can be seen in Project Cars 2 when overclocking the 1070, and this took the average frame rate to 87 FPS. This means overclocking the 1070 Ti produced 15% more performance, as the average frame rate hit 100 FPS. Performance gains for the 1070 in Quake Champions were minimal, just a 5% increase was seen. Because of this, the overclocked GTX 1070 Ti was 23% faster, though you should keep in mind that it does pack 27% more CUDA cores, so this kind of margin is certainly possible. This time when testing with Shadow of War, the 1070 was 7% faster once overclocked and came within a frame of the 1070 Ti. Of course, you can still overclock the 1070 Ti, and once we do this, it does become 13% faster. So one of the smaller wins for the 1070 Ti, but a noteworthy margin all the same. Basically, we see similar margins to those just seen when testing with Shadow of War, this time with Total War Warhammer 2, so there really isn't much else that needs to be said here. And finally, we have Wolfenstein II, which unsurprisingly shows similar margins to the games previously tested. So at this point, it's pretty clear how these two GPUs compare out of the box and overclocked. The arrival of the GeForce GTX 1070 Ti did make the standard 1070 somewhat pointless, at least in my opinion, which is why I didn't bother overclocking it in the previous comparison. Though I suppose that was a bit of an oversight as I had to create this video. Right now, the cheapest GTX 1070 on Amazon and Newegg is $410 US, though most are priced closer to $430 US. Since the GTX 1070 Ti can easily be had for $450 US on both of the websites just mentioned, it's the obvious choice. Again, the margins in Australia are a bit out of whack with what we're seeing over in the US. A typical 1070 Ti costs $680 Australian, while a typical 1070 costs $570 Australian. So while Australians are paying about 19% more for the Ti model, Americans are paying just 5% more. According to the MSRP, the 1070 Ti should cost 12.5% more, so this means US shoppers are actually overpaying for the standard 1070 right now, while Australian shoppers are overpaying for the 1070 Ti. So in summary, US shoppers should be buying the 1070 Ti, really no question about that. And for the Aussie viewers, I'd probably wait till the 1070 Ti drops down to or below $650 Australian. That said though, should you even consider buying a new graphics card at all right now? Unless you're getting an amazing sale price, I strongly recommend that you just wait at this point. I realise when it comes to PC hardware, there's always something better just around the corner, so you're always tossing up between waiting or buying now. This late in the product cycle though, I'd suggest waiting. The 1070 Ti is an attractive option for those buying a new graphics card in time for Christmas, and I guess that's what Nvidia's banking on as they try to flog their 18-month-old Pascal architecture one more time. Anyway, I hope that answers that one. Putting the small issue of whether or not you should buy a graphics card at all right now, just push that aside. I think it's safe to say that the GTX 1070 Ti seems like the best choice in the $400 to $500 US price range, especially if you plan to overclock, as you can achieve GTX 1080-like performance while saving enough money to purchase 4,400 crystals. Think of all that glorious loot. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.